All right, you settled on the house. You've got the keys. You've moved in. Now what? Now it's time to protect your house on the other end. But how do those two things work together? So I've got Jason and Scott from Cline Donaldson Law, and we are going to talk about what happens next and how these two worlds kind of collide. Hi everyone, my name is Tabitha, the ILM Realtor, helping you find your home here in Wilmington between the river and the sea. So we are going to jump in with Jason and Scott, and let's welcome them to the podcast. Thanks for coming on, guys.
Excited to be here.
Part 3. We've done 2 separate interviews.
Yep.
We've talked about what happens before we buy our house and everything that goes into
how we
protecting
protect
it.
our money, how we make sure we're feeling good.
Absolutely. And then we've talked about what to do long-term and how to protect it on the back end.
Good old estate planning.
Good old estate planning. So today we're going to kind of merge the two. And I want to ask some questions that from your perspectives, see how it goes. And then we'll go into some horror stories.
Yeah, we've got some.
So if I were to ask a bare bones simple question, like what is the biggest mistake somebody could make in real estate? I feel like you guys would have very different answers, or you'll surprise me and have the same one.
I think it starts at the beginning, and I've thought this question through. I think working with the wrong people can really picking a wrong realtor who steers you to the wrong house, the loan officer who gets you into the wrong loan program, FHA versus conventional and all that stuff. And then an attorney who counsels you through what your closing is. And so I think working with people you trust who are professional really matters. And so I think what people evaluate us on are 2 things: our substance and process. Is substantively, do we know what we're doing? Do we know how to do the job? And then process, do we make the person feel like it's efficient, communicative, and well done? And so I'm always evaluating ourselves on those 2 things. And I think that's my biggest thing, because we had a situation, and we'll go into the horror story stuff on somebody who messed up a deed, and it cost a client over $100,000 that we discovered this last week. And so
this is fresh.
Very ongoing fresh. And so it can happen quickly. And again, it's just making sure you have people that you trust, that you work with regularly, or that bring in people that they trust and things like that.
I like it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's just a lot of misconceptions, right? Not understanding the effect of not doing stuff. You might think naturally that certain things would happen, that again, you're married, you own property, that the natural thing would be for that property to pass to your spouse. But I know we spoke in the earlier podcast that if you own that home as an individual, your spouse is not on that home, well, there's a chance that your spouse might own that with your mother-in-law. That is generally something that we would want to avoid if you don't have children. So again, I think not planning, not understanding the effects of not planning probably would be the biggest mistake that people make in our world.
Yeah, and I think I'll caveat with Scott's joke there about the mother-in-law thing is probably the greatest mistake you can make is buying a property with your boyfriend or girlfriend before you're married. I generally try and steer people away from it. It's just not gotten there. And I think there's a whole class of people who are willing to have kids, move in together, buy a house together, but not get married. The world is set up. The legal system is set up for married couples to dispose of assets, for married couples to separate. When you don't have a marriage in place, but you did all the stuff that comes with marriage, the unwinding is actually tricky.
We talked about this in the last podcast, where the rules just changed in 2025 for illegitimate children outside of marriage. And I'm flabbergasted. I'm still processing that.
Yeah, and what I offer people, and I'm so passionate, I tell them, I will do a deed for you for free when you get married. Okay? Just buy your house, and then for free, you'll pay the recording fee at the registry, but I will prepare a deed to put you and your spouse together. And I say this as a person who, before I got married to my wife, I had been pretty serious with a different girl, and we went to premarital counseling at church, and it broke us up. But their big thing was, if we're going to push the divorce rate to 0, we got to stop some marriages from happening. So to bring that back to real estate, let's get married and then I'll get you your deed. And there's a lot of great, to Scott's point, survivorship protections, creditor protections that come with married couples holding property, boyfriend and girlfriend, or, you bought a house before the marriage and then now you're married. That's the concern of non-titled spouse.
That was my husband and I, when we got married. I had a townhouse, he had a house. And we were like, how do we do this? We ended up selling both of them and then building together, which was the right choice.
Sure. Yeah. And similar, my brother, same thing. He had a house. His girlfriend had a house. They got married. They ended up swapping deeds, basically. I'll quit claim to you, you quit claim to me. And so it was a mutual, and they turned one into a rental and stuff. But yeah, it's what I will say is just like Scott says, is there's an assumption that things will just kind of happen for you. And most of the time, there's just a little extra step involved.
And you don't know what you don't know. And I feel like lots of people buy houses and have friends who can talk to you about buying houses, but I feel like your side of the equation, it's not talked about nearly as much.
Absolutely. And to Jason's point, I think, again, we're in an era where a lot more people that are not married are buying property together. And it's just really important to understand the effects of that, possibly putting additional documents in place. You can still, even if you're not married, you can still plan. You can trust plan together. You can still use certain structures, LLCs, stuff like that to account for, well, how can we make this neat and clean if there is a breakup? Because the alternative is not neat and clean. The alternative is something that we call a partition action, which is timely, it's expensive.
Very expensive. And, 8 to 10, 12 months could be pretty common. And if you're in a situation where you've broken up, you're the only one living at the house paying the mortgage, and boyfriend or girlfriend are in the wind, you're going to want that to resolve quickly so you can sell, because you probably it was probably a joint mortgage payment situation. And now, absent that second income, you're probably in a tough financial bind. And think about that too, is the legal process of doing all that, mixing with the heartbreak of losing a relationship. I mean, let's not discount.
It can't be fun. It's going to be emotionally dirty on top of being paperwork dirty.
So we try and kind of put the shield up, as much as we can, and say, hey, listen, my advice, we can totally get this stuff when you're married, and it's better for you. You get like creditor protection with your deed when you're married. So that was my caveat of like, what's the best thing you do? Work with good people. Don't buy a house with your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever your situation is.
Yeah. One of the other things that I've been seeing a lot is like this on Instagram, on TikTok, people trying to give these big real estate advice. And they're like, do it like this and sign it up like that and pay your children. And the reality is we don't like to take advice from the internet. It's generally a bad idea.
Sometimes you land on some good ones, but most of the time, I would say, I think the big one we get a lot is people buy a house. So I guess we'll take a quick step. I'm going to give an explanation really fast of what the most common form of mortgage fraud in this country is. It's called occupancy fraud. So you can buy, when you're getting a mortgage, there's just kind of three ways you can hold: a primary, a second, or investment. As you move down that list, it gets a little more expensive because interest rates are not as good for primaries. Down payments go up. And so what'll happen is somebody will be like, oh, I don't really qualify to buy a rental home, but if I call it a second house or if I call it a primary, then I can qualify, because there's all kinds of programs for primary home buyers and stuff. And so what happens is they'll buy a primary, they get a mortgage on it, and then they'll call us and say, hey, I want to put this property in an LLC, right? Because they heard on the internet that the house should be in an LLC to protect them. We probably once a week get these calls of like, hey, can you deed this into my LLC for me? Yes, but no.
Can I ask questions, please?
Yeah, and so the biggest problem is, number one, there's a due on sale clause in every mortgage that says if the mortgage company does not consent to this transfer, triggers due on sale. So that means that the note's due. So
the whole thing.
The whole thing. Okay. So you just took out a $400,000 mortgage on a $450,000 house, and the mortgage company can call the note. They can say, hey, just like
start dipping your pennies.
So
I don't know. I couldn't scratch together $400,000 in a month.
So they'll ask me, how do people find out? The mortgage company's not checking the registry. How are they going to find out? Insurance, right? So now you don't own your house. The LLC owns the house. So you need to update your homeowner's insurance to reflect that the LLC is an insured. And since the mortgage company is a named beneficiary under such policy, they get an automatic notification from your insurance company, and bada bing. Because I asked our friends over at My Carolina's Insurance, right? Good people. What would happen if I put my house on LLC and failed to update the policy? And like, basically they would love, right, to be able to deny a claim. Big insurance companies would love to deny claims because the insured doesn't own the home, like, sorry. So that's our,
Hurricane came and took out your house. Well, it wasn't your house anymore. It was owned by the LLC, right?
Yeah.
You didn't insure on.
So yeah, pretty crazy. And so you can do it, but you have to do it with the consent of the mortgage company. And that's what the internet gurus are not mentioning, right? Because that's not going to get the views. That's not going to get the clicks. That's not sexy.
And exactly that. When you hear this stuff that seems so, oh my gosh, I never thought about this, or this is how we're going to make our millions, it's easy to fall into that trap. And so again, don't just blindly trust the internet. Call the professionals. So I feel like there's a horror story brewing in this.
There's tons. And we wish that these Instagram ads would come with flashing things that say, this is not legal advice. This is not tax advice, right? Because that's all we're getting is tax advice and legal advice generally from non-qualified people. And we might be getting tax advice and legal advice that applies to another state, but does not apply to our state. Yeah. And we don't have a way to filter those things, right? Like, we don't understand that the estate planning attorney that's sitting there is talking about stuff that occurs in a uniform trust code state, a uniform probate code state, but it might not apply to North Carolina law. And we're sitting there scrolling And that's not something that's going to click to a non-legal person or a non-tax person. They're not going to understand the differences between state law and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, we have tons of horror stories related to this stuff. Have a situation not too long ago where client came to us. They wanted the exact same thing to occur, had purchased a home as a primary residence, weren't able to move as a result of work and stuff like that. And now we're in a situation where they've committed mortgage fraud because they, like Jason was talking about, occupancy rules within the promissory note and deed of trust. They had to occupy that home, I believe, within 60 days in order to satisfy the terms of the mortgage.
Typical mortgage company, the note and the deed of trust will typically, and you'll sign an occupancy affidavit at closing too, but it basically says that you have an intent to occupy this within 60 days. You will physically occupy within 60 days, and then you should remain in the home. What the kind of standard mortgage rules are, basically you should occupy for more than not of the first year. So 6 months plus a day.
So I'm going to assume that this isn't all the papers that everybody's just like, this is what this paper says, flip, because we're signing 50 people.
I tell people be comfortable, right? Like, so we have a heavy military presence in the area. You could be here and then get called to move quickly. And so like in that instance, like you had full intention of moving into this home. That's not going to be mortgage fraud. And so I'm always cautious to tell people, like, fraud is it takes an intent to defraud. And so if you had an intent to remain and you truly believe, but due to life circumstances, you had to change, that can be a thing. But it is a scary thing for people to get into. Some lenders, it's like my favorite document in the package. It's a huge FBI logo and it says FBI investigates mortgage fraud because it's a federal thing. And, it kind of got popular. If you remember a couple months ago, the Trump administration was trying to get rid of this woman on the Federal Reserve Board because they argued, committed mortgage fraud by declaring something, I think either a second or primary when it should have been an investment. And like, that's a big deal.
And it's federal because like Freddie Fannie, and you're going through
highly
these
regulated
mortgages.
Yeah. And it's just, so I always tell people, like, it's kind of my joke, but like, if you're doing it, like, now's the moment to stop, like we haven't signed the paperwork yet. Like, don't do this. But for the most part, I think people do the right stuff. I was, had a mortgage company call me one time and asked, what do I need to do? They said we had a loan officer who apparently talked a guy into, so basically, like, backstory, attorney gets in trouble, gets disbarred, can't qualify for a house. So he calls his brother, who's a cop, to say, hey, I can't qualify for this house, but I'll give you the money. Straw buyer. So that's problem number one. And I'll give you the money and you go buy the house. He calls the loan officer, and the loan officer's like, you don't really qualify for a second, but if you declared this as your primary, you do qualify. So he's like, okay, let's do it.
This just feels like dirty situation.
So they do it. What do you know? The brother who got in trouble with the bar lost his law license, stopped making payments on the mortgage. The whole thing gets investigated. And so the mortgage company says, what do I do? I said, you turn over everybody. Like, you do not need to let your mortgage company, and it wasn't a local mortgage company, it was an out of town mortgage company, but turn the loan officer in, turn the borrower in, turn the straw buyer, purchaser, whatever. You just need to absolve yourself and be whatever you can do to assist prosecution so you don't get dragged into this thing.
100%.
That is not so scary stuff. I mean, we see these things all the time.
Yeah, it's your daily. Like, you guys are living this. So it feels like when my sister-in-law over COVID, she was one of the contact tracers. So everything was, everyone's dying, everything is bad, don't leave your house. And we were already scared, and that made it even scarier. So 100%. What I feel like I'm hearing is you guys terrifying us. But
and hopefully, for the most part, people buy their house and have a great experience.
Yes.
And they can get a plan in place and protect their asset. And that is the experience for most of the time.
Yeah.
It's rare clients of ours run into these things. But, for when it does happen, it sucks.
Yeah. And when you start from the very beginning and you say, hey, this is my plan, this is what I want to do, then it can be set up the right way. Then you get actual advice.
It makes it a whole lot easier. Exactly. Early intervention, we call it, right?
We had two clients. They're actually, it's like such as Wilmington's a small town. My son was off school.
That's what Tim says.
Yeah.
A big small town.
Yeah. My son was out of school on Friday. Had some clients that are just coming in. A realtor had referred them. They're coming by to pick up our wire instructions. And we start chatting. And the guy says to my son, oh, what do you go to school? And he says, oh, I go to Gregory. And he's like, oh, Dr. Afander's kids are here. I'm like, that's my son's best friend's parents. And it's very small town. But we start talking, and they were, and they were like, well, what do we think? We need to probably do a little estate plan. This is our third house or whatever. What do you think? And like, I said, with that many properties, you guys probably need to talk about a trust and stuff. And his wife was like, yeah, his mom did not have any estate plan in place, and we had to go through probate. Miserable. My dad had a trust, and I was like done in 3 days basically. And so it was this really funny stark contrast of like, two people who had been through the experience. And I've seen trusts go bad where they can fail for failure to be funded and things like that. But for the most part, yeah, I mean, let's talk about a goal and then do the things to get you to your goal.
Exactly. I mean, can't know your goals if we don't sit down and talk to you too, right? And that's part of the fact finding mission. That's where we're going to learn what you want to do, what we're trying to accomplish, and the best way to structure that. And within the budget, of course, too, right? Is because that's an important thing. You've
Absolutely.
just dumped a ton of money into a house, not flush with cash at this point, but we still have a desire and an intent and a want to assure that this goes where we want it to go and not to somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, living as a co-tenant with your mother-in-law could be the thing that you did not plan on. But it is a real thing, and I think when we make for most people, that home purchase, right, is the largest financial decision most of us make in our lives, or that we will make a couple times. And so we just see a lot of horror stories, because if the average person, I think, moves every 7 years or something, let's say that they buy 5 houses in their life. I think my Wilmington office closed 5 yesterday, right? So we just see a higher volume of these things. And to your point, we're contract tracing, bad stories.
Yeah. And that's a lot of reason for these kinds of podcasts is this is our everyday. We are doing this day in, day out. You're not nearly as worried about wire fraud because you have all these protections. You know that it's working. You're doing 20 a day. But for somebody who's buying a house, this might be the first wire that they've ever done, or the first one in 15 years. So it's all about making people feel comfortable, really explaining the process and why and what happens if you don't.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess one kind of interesting area of the law too, and it's kind of funny because tied back to my time in law enforcement, which we spoke about earlier, but right before I left law enforcement, New York City got really big on cracking down on deed fraud. I worked for the sheriff's department. We actually put together a deed fraud unit where we went out and looked at some of those straw buyers, looked at potential fraudulent transactions. And with AI and with all these things, we are starting to see a lot more of this stuff come about. So putting in some guardrails in your estate plan, having incapacity provisions in there to make sure that mom and dad don't unknowingly sign away a deed to the house, making sure that Jason has that certified wire fraud protection stuff in place. Like, these are all things that are becoming more and more of a reality. I mean, I just heard that basically they can get you on the phone for a 5-second phone call, and they'll have your entire voice that they can pick up and automate a phone call with your voice to your loved ones and tell them, hey, I'm in a pinch. I need you to sign over this transaction for reverse mortgage on the house. I need some money out. And you've now all of a sudden you've quitclaimed your property to somebody that you didn't know.
Or what we hear is, I'm in trouble with the law and I need a quick wire. Can you send me some money real fast? But I mean, you remember the Mission Impossible movie a couple years ago, he's leaning over Philip Seymour Hoffman. He says, read this, and he reads it and it clones his voice, and then he's able to talk like
that is reality.
We had it's readily available to us now, right? Like, I joke that like the technology in that movie Enemy of the Estate, which was like 25 years ago, was like cutting edge at the time, and your smartphone does more. And so like the tools out there that are available to take advantage of these things is crazy. But I was thinking about this. We were kind of making fun of the TikTok gurus and stuff, but the target of these types of bad information is not just first-time home buyers or whatever. I had a very sophisticated real estate client. He's been doing real estate a long time, does real estate development, and he had called because he's like, I keep seeing this title lock stuff on Fox News or whatever. Is this real? So the disinformation stuff hits, I think, a very broad spectrum from people who are in this game to people who don't. And I think what people want, right, is they want good advice. They want to maximize their value, minimize tax implications, and make sure that their plan's in place. But
the most important thing I feel like for a lot of couples, married women, is they talk about like security and safety and feeling like everything is going to be okay. And if we're getting taken care of on the front end and we're getting taken care of long-term and for our family and for our children, then that security, like I feel very safe in this little bubble right now. I feel very educated and very safe about my decision-making processes.
And I think what people would probably like is like the same thing that Scott and I would do. So like my wife and I vacationed in Europe last year. We made sure we had advance directives and powers of attorney for my mother-in-law was watching the kids. So like she had powers of attorney for the kids, HIPAA waivers in case, or like all these things that like just threw it together really fast. Cause like we're going to be gone for 12 days. Hopefully nothing did happen, but like, it's great to know that like, she can take them to the hospital. She's approved on their doctor list. If she needs to sign a document for the kids or for us or whatever, like they can do those things. And so I think it's more accessible and less expensive than most people think. And Scott and I were talking, and you guys might have brought this up earlier, but somebody did a study on the cost of no estate plan, one of these internet like willandtrust.com plans against a local attorney drafted plan. And people hear the cost of a trust and like, oof, a couple $1,000. Then you look at the cost of probate. which is a couple thousand plus,
Yeah.
and the headache of probate. And I tell people all the time, as like a transactional attorney, I hate doing probate. Like, I promise you it's miserable, for the point where like most people will call us after attempting to do it themselves and like, how much can I pay you
Please
to
take this off my
take
plate.
this off my plate?
Yeah.
To
Mm-mm.
just do this for me.
Yeah.
And it's I will say the clerks do a great job. They try and help, but like they're not attorneys. They're not there to give legal advice. And sometimes you get bad legal advice too, which we experienced this week from, had a client come to us, and
Yeah, is this the horror story?
this could be a horror story.
Okay.
It's
Horror story.
well, so I guess the one horror story I always start with is I had a client call me. He's trying to buy this house, and I'm like, hey, I'm trying to figure out what the ownership situation is. So a mom lived here in Wilmington. He died in 2019. Her son had predeceased her. So she had no will, nothing in place. And so her only heir was her son, and her son passed away before she did. So in the way that it works, the state determines how your property flows without a plan. And so next it would go up to her parents. Her parents had both already passed away. So then typically it goes to brothers and sisters. Well, she didn't have any brothers and sisters. She was an only child. So do you know what happens next?
It's cheap. We just learned about
Well,
this, yes?
it can.
No?
Further.
It can go further, but first go up another step. So now grandparents
Oh my gosh.
also dead.
Well,
So
yeah,
then
that tracks.
it splits 50-50 maternal grandparent line and paternal grandparent line. And then it comes back down.
And then it comes back down?
And so we got fortunate one half. The maternal grandparent side was pretty clean, and there was
Okay.
only 3 people on that. On the paternal grandparent side, so we went back to who he died, I think in like 1962. His kids were all born in the 30s. He had 7 children. Now imagine the branches, right? We are at like 42 heirs, and we can't even get them all, like, right? Because
Yeah.
try and find an obituary for somebody who died in 1945, right? So this is what, and all she would have needed to do is like maybe have a will that says like it goes to the local ASPCA or something,
Yeah.
do anything. But like it's a situation where like a childless adult is now just, this property is just nebulous.
Well, and I would assume that there's tons of costs that come around with that. So by the time these people are even getting any money, what's it going to be, like $40?
So it depends, right? And we always joke in the real estate world, this stuff only happens on like $25,000-$30,000 piece of land. It's not like the guy who's got a nice house at landfall doesn't
got people
typically
that
let
want
this
it.
happen,
Yeah.
right? So it's always sort of, but this is like a house at Bayshore. It's a nice little place. It's probably worth a couple $100,000. And at that point, what ends up happening is an investor starts picking them off one by one, says, hey, listen, your great grandmother's kid, or whatever had owned this house, and there's an argument that you had a piece of it, and I'll give you $1,000 to sign this quick claim deed right now. And that's typically what happens, and they kind of just pick them off one by one, but like it takes work. I mean, you got to find these people, contact them, and then from
money.
Yeah, and that's right. And so you see how quickly things can devolve where it might have never been your intent for those things. But
No.
at the same time, like she was now a childless, unmarried, no family. What should happen with that stuff, or where should it go? You should still get to
That's the job.
yeah. So you should still get to direct where it
Why
goes.
weren't you involved?
Yeah, that's right.
Never came to me.
That's right.
Didn't-
What would you have done
Start
in that
early on.
situation?
Yeah, would have put at least a very simple will in place that said, similar to what Jason said, where that property goes in the event she passes away.
And I think like we all have, I don't know, like I've got aunts and uncles that are not really my aunts and uncles,
Yes.
but like there were people in her life that could have probably greatly benefited from her, hey,
Sure.
I don't have a kid. I mean, we did an estate plan, for a woman who she was never married and never had kids, but she loved her niece. And so everything went to her
Yeah.
niece, right? Great. Let's do that. Obviously, this woman didn't have brothers and sisters, but there was definitely somebody out there who she probably would have preferred to get this than to let the situation devolve.
Our best friends are my kids' aunts and uncles. And it was quasi recently that they were like, wait, she's not your sister? And I was like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And
That's actually not the
like
case.
some of my closest friends, I call him my cousin, but like it was a cousin through marriage. My mom's previous marriage, she's not married anymore, so he's not even my cousin. We have no legal relationship, but
That's where it goes once removed, right?
yeah, that's right. And so my trust, he's the successor trustee if my wife and I are passed. That's the trust that I have with him, and my cousins call him Uncle Alex and stuff,
Yeah.
but he's no legal relationship.
No legal relation.
And that's where I say everybody has a relationship with somebody they want.
Yes.
They would prefer to go to things than the escheating to the state, which would be kind of,
Yes.
you know,
Which we talked about in the last thing, which
Yeah.
is the state gets all your money. But it sounds like that's actually kind of hard.
it can be pretty tough. Typically what happens with these is the tax foreclosure. No one's paying taxes anymore. And typically if there's a mortgage, the mortgage company will foreclose pretty quickly. But this was a situation where there's no mortgage, right? So she paid cash, put all our money into this house, and somebody was paying the taxes on it, or somebody took a peek and started paying taxes to start picking people off, whatever.
It would have been easier just to not.
We get the call all the time. People are like, oh, there's a property that's about to go in tax foreclosure. What happens if I go down and pay the taxes? Like, then you avoid the foreclosure for these people.
That's
you get
another
nothing. You get nothing.
Instagram-ism is these people that go to the courthouses and they're like, I paid the taxes and now I own this house. Not in North Carolina.
No, you got to bid. You got to win. You got to win a bid. And good property generally does not go for cheap.
Yeah.
Like the junk stuff goes for junk. But I mean, it happens pretty regularly. But I mean, I had a client call me. He was trying to buy a piece of land in Carolina Beach, nice piece. And he was bidding on it. It got up to like $600,000, right? Because he could put a couple houses on it. And so if you think that like you're going to go down and get a piece of land on Carolina Beach at a tax auction for $5,000, I got something else to sell you.
You can't. You're not going to be able to build on it. I hope you like your tent.
You could like we found one. My brother-in-law is big on this. He's always trying to find these things, and he found one. And it was a piece of common area in a subdivision whose developer went down, and you weren't allowed to build because it was open space requirements. So like you just own a piece of dirt that like you literally can do nothing with. It's open space requirements. So
please do a title search before you go buy any of this property.
The nice thing is if you win the tax foreclosure auction, though, it quiets title, which is really nice. It can
define that.
So quieting title, I don't know where the term came from. This is where I describe it in my head, is when there's title problems, there's a bunch of people speaking at it.
He does the same thing in his brain that I do.
When I quiet it, it means it's clean. It's quiet. There's nothing. But a quiet title action typically cures title issues. A tax foreclosure, a lot of times, really bad heirs land. We kind of joke like, well, you could let it fall the tax foreclosure and just buy it back. Maybe you can get it, but it does quiet title after a redemption period. So it can be like if you get a tax foreclosure piece of land, it can be a good thing for you if you win the bid. For foreclosure purposes, like what we talking about with our other attorney Tom yesterday, HOAs have the right to foreclose in North Carolina.
I learned this.
Yeah. If there's a mortgage though, it's likely that the mortgage is superior to that. So you might buy a house at an HOA foreclosure for $15,000 that still has a $300,000 mortgage on it. So you can't extinguish senior creditors.
Title.
Yes.
Do the title search.
Exactly.
My brother-in-law tried to buy a condo in Charlotte at an HOA foreclosure auction, and it was $5,000. The condo is probably worth $300,000, and the mortgage was like $275,000. I'm like, there's no deal here.
Yeah.
You're going to save $15,000,
which
you could have just bought.
But thankfully, you looked at it for him ahead of time and were able to tell him that.
That's right. There's a reason it's only going for $5,000 because you got to take subject to this big mortgage. And what I tell people too is, typically, if they're bad on their mortgage, there's probably some other debts laying around. 100%. Now, a foreclosure can wipe out junior creditors, but it can't wipe out senior creditors.
Yes, that second mortgage on the house that they gave priority to.
Gone.
I mean, I always tell a story from when I was at the sheriff's department. One of the things that the civil division did up there was judgment sales. So I remember this one very, very clearly. It was a house in Brooklyn, valued at about like $1.2 million at that time.
Ouch.
Guy came in, cash bid $800,000 for the house, if my memory serves me right. Bought the house, come to find out that there was a senior lien on the house that was not getting extinguished. Came into our office bawling, crying, saying he just spent all his family's money. At the end of the day, we had to steer him towards the court and say, look, all we can do, we closed on this. Like it was your job to do a title search beforehand. He didn't do it. Somehow he was able to convince somebody in the court to set aside the sale. Yeah. Got his money back. He was out the 10% down payment that he put, but was able to get the rest of the money back. Total lifesaver, but it could have all been avoided had he done a search on the house and knew what he was purchasing.
Yeah, tax foreclosures are okay. You'd be all right because a tax foreclosure, government, of course, in law gave themselves super lien status. Even if there was a mortgage on tax foreclosed property, the tax foreclosure will wipe that out. By the time the government would get to that foreclosure, the mortgage company would have beat you to it. And it's not likely that your mortgage company essentially won't let you get delinquent on taxes, right? We escrow it typically. They would just step in and pay it and then bill you for it as part of theirs. So like it's not common.
You're protecting themselves.
That's right. It's not common in tax foreclosures that you're going to have a mortgage on a property. It's mostly heirs land. Somebody bought it. And we see this a lot. There's a whole section of the bar doing what's called the Black Heirs Project, where for a long time there was mistrust of government institutions in that community. So there were no deeds. They didn't have wills and estates because they were concerned that somehow it was going to be stolen from them or something. You will see where maybe grandpa walked the property and said, this part's for you, this part's for you. And that was how in their family it did. But legally, that's not how that works. So we have situations where we cannot fix or ascertain. So the bar has now a whole voluntary pro bono project to try and help people protect and keep their land. but it is a massive undertaking. I mean, I could spend 40, 50 hours doing a search on stuff like that and still not get to where we need to go.
Yeah. Add in the legitimation problem.
Yeah. Well, and that's always like my joke is always, I feel a lot better for like illegitimate children if a woman is the decedent we're looking at, because most people would have noticed her. But for men, like maybe they had an illegitimate child or whatever, and we might never know until years later they say, hey, by the way, this is, because the way that we record birth certificates, I can search that guy's birth certificates in like the New Hanover registry. But what happens if he was in Vegas with his friends for a weekend, right? And that kid was born in Carson City, Nevada.
Well, what if it's like in vitro? What if it's,
he was a donor. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Then what? Do we go genetics or do we just go birth certificates?
Yeah,
do we go, how does this spiral?
I had a title company one time I called because we had a decedent who passed away. He was never married, no children, but there was an argument that he had an illegitimate child. He was not on the birth certificate for the child. So I asked the title company, and the guy died 10 years ago. So how do you do a paternity test on a guy who's in the ground, on this kid? And how do you get a blood sample from this guy?
You only got 1 year from the time he dies. If the kid was born within a 1 year period, that's what the statute gives you to do that blood search.
Yeah.
They have to file a paternity action
so
for
I asked the
legitimation.
title
You
company.
don't know what you don't know. See, I'm learning so much
So
right
I
now.
asked the title company, what do I do? I mean, because if he was truly the child of that man, instead of this guy's family getting the land, this kid gets everything. And that's a $400,000 question, right? Well,
Yes.
I wanted to get
that
this
everybody
right.
wants answered.
And so the impetus would be on that child to somehow prove legally that he was the true child of that person. I don't know the answer.
That's funny. I thought you were going into the fertile octogenarian.
Oh, this is actually my favorite. I had one of these.
My goodness.
This is the greatest. So
I feel like I need to be prepared.
I pull all of my fellow attorneys in our office. We have 7 attorneys who work for us, and I think only one of them knew. I think Scott was the only one that knew. So there is a legal concept in the law called the fertile octogenarian.
Nope, that's not a real word. Say it again really slow.
The fertile octogenarian.
Octogenarian.
So imagine for yourself a 95-year-old woman with no arms or legs in a coma.
Okay.
The law says she can still have kids. So that's what we call the fertile octogenarian. So it's a title problem. So we had this legitimately happen. A woman signs a deed, and I told her she should go back to the attorney that drafted this and punch him in the face. But she drafted a deed from herself to her children and then to her children. So imagine, I'll make this easier. So from Gladys to Susan, and then to Susan's children upon Susan's death. Okay. But the problem is that leaves us with what's called an open class. So Susan at the time of this deed, so Gladys was 90, Susan was 60, and her children are all adults. And one of the 3 children of Susan was trying to get the property because she was going to build on it. Mm-hmm. And I was like, we can't do it, because you have an open class here. Susan can still have kids. She's like, my mom is 60. She's not having kids anymore. I'm like, unfortunately, she's the fertile octogenarian. Technically, Gladys can still have kids. But they created through this deed what should have been done. They should have said to my daughter and then to her children now living.
Yes.
Right? That would have foreclosed the open class. But what happened is Susan, in my example, could still have children. She could adopt. She could have children. But the law says even if you're a 95-year-old, armless, legless woman in a coma, you could still have children. And until Susan was dead, we can't get clear title on the property because she can truly have children.
So again, this would have been a problem that you would have fixed.
Yeah, or the drafting attorney, whoever drafted the deed. Because that was a life estate deed. But we could have fixed it in a will. We could have fixed it with the trust. We could have fixed it with
But the problem is you can't just fix that deed because now we have beneficiaries, remote beneficiaries who could still come into being, who have a future interest in the property. That's a vested interest. So you can't fix that, right? Because until Susan dies, it's unfixable.
I don't like it.
I had one though. I called my law professor when I got one. I got the fertile octogenarian. And I was like, unfortunately for the client, they can't do anything with this land. But I always thought this is one of those lessons you learn in law school. Like, it's just one of these remote things. But
it's like how realtors are like, someone one day is going to ask me how many square feet are in an acre.
Yeah. What's the number?
I don't know. 5327.
Yeah. Okay. We all know, ironically, how many feet are in a mile. 5,280. Right? Yeah. Everybody knows that.
I don't run.
But I never remember. But yeah.
Running is my least favorite activity.
It's to the closing table, right?
Just to the closing table and away from bears. And I just have to be faster than the person
who's running with you.
That's running with me. And I'm pretty sure I can do that. So in those situations, that is why you hire the right attorney and you're not just going online and trusting some random
Yeah.
document.
We had
Because what happens if you did all this to protect yourself and you did the absolute opposite?
100%. And drafting mistakes are common. Poor drafting, hurried drafting. We just had a will that came into the office not too long ago. And the will said, and I don't understand what the thoughts were here, but leaving all my real estate to my sister on the condition that my girlfriend has the right to live in this one piece of property for the remainder of her life. But should she leave that property or die, then the proceeds from that property will pass to, they call it the residuary in the legal terms, to whoever's down the line. Well, the girlfriend was the down the line. So if she leaves the property or dies, she gets the property.
She got it anyway.
But it was supposed to go to the sister on that condition. So like, again, simple, clearly just kind of a hurried drafting thing that wasn't thought through when it was done.
You get arrested, don't call me. I don't do criminal law. So my answer is don't go to, I don't know, general practice attorneys are kind of going away now, but that's what I think happens in some of these situations is where we think just because I'm an attorney, I really know, like I don't draft wills, right? If it comes in my office, I'm going to flip it to Scott because I don't want to make those mistakes of drafting something. You know, we had one where, you know, it's like when you want to relinquish a right, this is like, took us 2 years to fix this, but boyfriend and girlfriend had a house together and he passed away first. And the kids of the boyfriend agreed that their interest should have gone to their mom, but he didn't have a estate plan. So they signed relinquishment. So I relinquished my right to take under my.
But that takes non-selfish,
right?
Good people.
But here's what happens. If you don't get that relinquishment in from 9 months from the date of death of the decedent, it has a different effect. So if you sign that relinquishment inside 9 months from the death of their dad, then it's fine. It vests back to her. In the alternative, after 9 months, it has the effective vesting title in your heirs. So what happens is these 3 adult people of this guy sign their relinquishments at 11 months, and now their minor children are the owners of the property. Real story. And
why does this have to be so complicated?
I know. So, but that's where I don't know what happened. This was out kind of a rural area in North Carolina, and I thought like maybe the guy who prepared these relinquishments was a general practice guy who didn't know that, like, he was just preparing a relinquishment per statute and he this is what you guys want to do. They had no idea. And it took us 2 years of like tracking people down, and because it was this woman who's got property from her now deceased mother had to call her mom's former boyfriend's kids who they haven't spoken in 10 years to try and get them to quit claim their interest in the property and then re-relinquish for their minor children.
Yeah.
A mess.
Yeah. Could be a general practice attorney, could be online AI services. I mean, I always crack jokes about this stuff. Like you go on to like rocketlawyer.com or what's the big
Zoom.
one?
Legal Zoom.
Legal Zoom. And you click on it and the first thing it says right at the top is like, we are not giving you legal advice. Like you are basically certifying that we could screw up and you have, and we're not attorneys, so we have no insurance policy that you're going to be able to hit when this thing is screwed up.
Legal Zoom is just a mall where attorneys agree to stand in the door, you know, and like you say, I want an LLC, and then they'll just contract some random attorney who's agreed to do services for Legal Zoom. And that is an attorney doing stuff over there, but Legal Zoom themselves, that's the Walmart of the law. And you're just getting an attorney off the shelf.
If you don't select the plan that comes with the attorney review, if you just select the do-it-yourself, the $200 plan, well, you're getting no back. You're getting no remedy in the event something occurs.
That is
and we see all
terrifying.
the time. I mean, we see drafting mistakes in these things. Listen, you have a simple estate. You want to leave everything 1/3 to each of your 3 kids. Go ahead, go online, take care of that. But you have any creative property stuff you want to left? I mean, I had a will. Woman died. She lived in North Carolina for a while. She had 3 properties in North Carolina. She ended up dying down in Florida. Her will named her best friend as the executor.
Classic.
I'd do that.
Florida, if you want to name an out-of-state executor, they have to be related by blood or marriage. So you cannot be an out-of-state executor in Florida if you are our friend. So they had to go and try and find a professional fiduciary in Florida to open this estate. Well, the property that was in Florida was so small that it wouldn't have been worth any attorney taking it on. They sat around for, it had to be close to 2 years before they were able to get this thing probated. When I connected them with an attorney who was licensed in both North Carolina and Florida that was able to serve as the fiduciary for it. But again, these are simple things that if you don't sit down with an attorney, you don't think about these things.
Why would you?
And you would never know. That's not common sense, right? You think anybody can be my executor. Who cares who it is?
Yeah, I'm choosing this for me.
Yeah.
This is what I want. And then the law behind you in invisible ink that nobody's ever going to read.
Exactly.
Yeah. North
Says
Carolina
it.
has some funny rules where you can be a person of good character in the community and serve as someone's executor. It's like a really funny, like after a number of steps of like, first it's like blood relatives and heirs, and then it like goes through. But we had a situation where we had to try and fix something, and like the realtor ended up being an executor for like a former client's thing because she was a member of good standing in the community.
So guys, this was, again, mission critical information, but we did not discuss everything that goes on behind the scenes. Like, we just barely scratched the surface. So my recommendation for anybody who's listened to this is obviously to reach out. Yeah. We are not, even as realtors, lawyers, I cannot give you legal advice, but the internet is not the place to be looking for it either. So thank you guys so much for doing this. This was part 3 of 3. So if you wanted any more information from either of these gentlemen, go back and watch the previous episodes. But again, guys, thanks so much.
Fantastic time.
Thank you, Tabitha.
So if there's anything I want you guys to take away from this, it's that please don't try to do this kind of stuff on your own. Reach out for help, ask for support. And if you need guidance, I can absolutely point you in the right direction. Until then, thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope to see you around our perfect little city.